Hi, everyone. This is your host, Tommi Vincent of In Her Words. And today we have joining us at the table MJ Acosta-Ruiz. And we are so grateful and delighted to have you here today in this conversation. And we are going to jump right into it. And the very first thing I want to ask you today is, who is MJ?
Oh, I think that's a loaded question, right? Because the answer tends to evolve. It has evolved over the past, I mean, my entire life for sure, but especially over the last, I would say, 5 or so years. I think coming into my own, not just in my profession, but as a woman, standing in my power, standing in my truth, has been something that I've been working on for a really long time in adulthood, just in finding identity and in who I feel MJ really is, right? And so at this point in my life, MJ is someone who is just determined to succeed, but equally as determined to remain kind and grounded through that success. And so I surround myself with people who keep me there, right? And who keep me focused and remind me of all that I've overcome and all that's still left to do.
Mm-hmm. And you've done a lot. So I'm going to put this out there for anyone who does not know. MJ is the host of NFL Total Access on NFL Network, and also you are the co-host of L Huddle podcast.
Hmm.
So you have some things that you are working on, and it's really great to see you blossoming in this space and really creating a lane for yourself, and also showing up in a way where we understand and we know that representation matters. And
Hmm.
so you having this space and being able to not, it's not even just about being a voice, but it's about being a visual. Because when
Yes.
young people can see something, then what happens is their horizon opens and they begin to see possibilities of what can become, and even greater. So I am so thankful to be able to watch this journey and see you evolving in a space and taking up space in your lane.
Thank you, Tommy. Yeah, that's really important for me because I think so much of my career has been folks wanting to make me feel like I'm only in that space to check a box, right? And whether that is their intention or their perception of the situation, I know that by me simply existing and being in that space and doing my job well, um, is the biggest form of representation. The normalcy of it, right? To see someone who looks like me on screen, out in the community as a forward facing public figure is important for people. I didn't really have that growing up. So I didn't even know that this was available to me at this level, right? So I've
Mhm.
I've come to this position in spite of not having that. And so it's always present to me to be able to forge that path for others to come now behind me.
Mhm. So there's a process that takes place before we reach any level of success.
Hmm.
So it's like the process ultimately is the classroom. And the
Yeah.
process is a part for people that sometimes is the challenging aspect, because in order to get to the result you desire to see, or even sometimes stumble into the result of success,
Hmm.
you have to endure the process. Can you share a lesson that stands out to you that without question has prepared you for the quarter of life that you're in right now?
I think one of the biggest lessons is timing, right? So often when we have set our goals, when we even have a clear vision of where we want to go, we want it now. I feel like I'm ready. I feel like I've done all the work. I feel like I should be there, right? And that piece of it is not really in our control. There are so many other factors. There are so many other pieces of the equation that have to come together, and powers much bigger than we are, who will guide us and put us in that position when and if the timing is right. And that has
Mm-hmm.
been a tough lesson to learn because I'm very impatient, right? I'm a hyper type A. I'm goal oriented. So I want it now. I want it in my time, and that's just not the way that life works. So trusting in the timing, even moments of impatience, that doesn't mean I'm not going to be impatient about it, but in trusting that it's coming. And if it doesn't, it's because there was another another area that I was supposed to be in, another lesson that I was supposed to glean from that. And to your point, the
Mm-hmm.
process, trusting that process. That's the toughest thing to do, right? Because all that we can control is our actions, what we're putting into it, the energy that we're pouring into a certain task or a certain goal. But everything else is out of our hands. And that could be very, very frustrating. But the lesson of timing and trusting that timing, I'm still working on it. Not an expert at that just yet. Don't think I'll ever be. But it's a reminder, right? A mantra that I remind myself. My mom says it in Spanish all the time, todo toma tiempo, which just means everything takes time and in its right time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about, and we touched on this a little bit, but let's talk about the power of representation. And I heard you mention that your parents actually highlighted to you, um, you being the first Latina woman to have this opportunity. When you wrapped your brain around that, because like in that moment, it was kind of like, that is the case. Um, what take us through that moment when you realized the historical moment of what the gravity of this is for you?
Yeah. And it just wasn't like the first Latina woman, the first woman of color, right, at the network to host a space. So it was a representation for a group much larger than I was even cognizant of, right? So I think for me and for my parents, right, that moment of representation was so huge. For me, it was just as a journalist, like, wow, this is another step that I'm taking in my career, a bigger platform. But they, of course, inherently felt the power of what the moment was. And so they are those people who keep me grounded and who keep me focused and who remind me of just how special everything that's happening in my life really, really is. I mean, I'm very cognizant of it. I always lead from a place of gratitude and humility. But my parents always just bring this layer of warmth and love. And for them, that was what they felt in that moment. Like, it's our daughter who all we wanted for her was to be safe and to be successful in the traditional sense. But she went in this path that, my parents didn't know what the journalism world entailed, what was going to happen to me, if I was actually going to be successful. For many years, you start off as a journalist, you're not making a ton of money. So I was eating ramen noodles like I was still in college, and they just wanted me to be safe and secure and be able to provide for myself. And so to get to this level where I'm on a national platform, I don't think any of us um, knew that it was an option. But for them, it was, I'm not surprised that it was them who immediately sort of pointed that out to me.
Oh no, absolutely. And I want to so and I recognize the gravity of being a woman of color and you having the opportunity. The reason why I think it's so important to call out specifically a Latina woman is because I see women operating in spaces in many fields all over the globe.
Yeah.
But when that woman doesn't look like me, it doesn't hit the same way as if it was a black woman doing it.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's really important for people to understand when people talk about representation, it's not it's not to take away from another group of people.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
is to highlight the power of when we utilize the platforms that we're given, when we utilize them to really make sure that we're conscious of who has the seat at the table, who has been given that platform, because it empowers the young people that are coming up behind us who are our future. And it allows for them to dream beyond what they have not seen. And they're saying now, okay, this is an area I will focus in on, I will educate myself in, because there is opportunity and possibility for me here. So that's why I really wanted to, and I appreciate it being a representation of women, a representation of women of color, but specifically, there are some little girls who see you and they are like, I can do this. And that's powerful.
It is. I agree with you fully. I agree with you 100%. I think it's so important for people to see themselves reflected in these spaces where traditionally there has been zero, representation, not just for them, but for their parents, for their aunties, for their primas, for everybody, right? To suddenly be like, wait a minute, that's one of us. That's important. It's important to see that, because I still do it now. I'm like, oh, hey, sis, I see. And it's like almost you don't even have to say a word, right? It's just that feeling. If I run into another Black woman, another Latina in the building, I'm like, hey, I haven't seen you before. It's like just an instant, like, I got you, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where the family part of it, it says, all right, we're all we got in this space, literally, because we're probably the only ones here. What can I do?
Mm-hmm.
How can I help you? How can I make this even an ounce easier for you to navigate? And that's important, even when we're not in the same building, when it's just somebody watching on the screen, you still feel that sense. I see the comments that I get, and despite how many obstacles there still are to overcome,
Mm-hmm.
that reminds me on a daily basis, it's not just about you. It's about so many others who are trying to get here too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Um, to be successful at what you're doing, there's a lot of preparation that goes into this. How do you prepare yourself to get ready to go on air?
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of different aspects to it, right? So I consume my topic, and which is football in this particular case, but anything that I'm preparing for, my daily basis is NFL, and football is my entire life, right? So in that sense, I'm always in it. I'm always watching it, talking about it, reading up on it, and studying the history of it. But I have to know the day to day, and there's so many teams, there are so many players, there are so many owners, there are so many GMs. So it's trying to know as much as possible without overwhelming myself with the things that I don't need to worry about, right? So I had to learn to sort of funnel it down to what is the most germane information that I'm bringing to my audience. That was a big lesson for me, because I thought I need to know every single thing, even though I already do, right? Like, I was always psyching myself out. Like, girl, what you
Mm-hmm.
studying for?
Mm-hmm.
You already know this. You've been in it for over a decade. Like, you got it. You got it. But there was this fear that somebody was going to say something. Like, there's always this reference that I go back to, right? Because if a man knows football, it's just assumed that he does. It doesn't matter if he was a
Mm-hmm.
former player or not, if he was just a journalist, if he's never picked up a ball or a pair of cleats in his entire life. It's like, okay, yeah, he probably knows what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But if a woman says, oh, yeah, I cover football, really? Well, then tell me the blood type of the coach of the Seahawks from 1950. Really? That's the metric that you're basing my knowledge and my expertise on. You get what I'm saying? It's like the measuring stick is much different for us, and it's always been thrown in my face that way. And it was very specifically to throw me off like that. And I bought into it very early on in my career. So I was always coming from this place of panic, of freaking out all the time. Like, oh, well, I don't know his blood type, then I'm terrible at my job. I suck, which is, of course, not accurate. So now I just remind myself, like, first of all, I am an expert in this field. That is why I got here, because I put in the work for many, many, many years, over a decade. But then also, I'm constantly consuming it. There's not a day that goes up that I don't wake up, say my morning gratitude, and then pick up my phone. What have I missed? I live on the West Coast, so I'm already 3 hours behind, right? So I got to catch
Yeah.
up to the rest of the world. So it's already ingrained in me. So the process of getting ready for air is a day long thing, and it never sort of stops, even when I come home. Um, so I feel like I'm always ready at any moment, because news has broken, and they say you got 5 minutes to get in there, get your mic on, and we're going.
Yeah.
So you always sort of have to stay ready. But the rest is just the production day. So we have our show meetings, we know exactly what we're talking about, we have our research moments, and then the rest is what we know and our personalities coming through to give everybody the best show that we can.
Mm-hmm. So this is my final question for you. And this segment of our conversation is I'm bringing her to the table with me. And this is your opportunity to verbally give another woman her flowers, for that this journey, this process, and where you are, that you aren't this woman without her fingerprint on your life?
Hmm. It's actually a collective of women. So I think most people who like follow me on social media, they know how close I am with Joy Taylor, who's another Black woman in this space who absolutely crushes it. Um, but it's our collective friends group. It's Joy, um, my friend Kelly, my friend Janice, and my friend Jordana, and that is our like tight knit village. And these are all women who work in the business, work either on air, on the production side, plus, 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 plus. We're all ingratiated and we've all known each other for over a decade. So from the early days of us just grinding as freelance journalists or as just very young journalists, trying to make it. And at every step of the way, we have had each other's backs. We have been able to be a source of comfort or a source of tough love or both all in this, at the same time. And there is no way I think that I would have gotten through some of the darkest points, not just in my life, but in my career, without this tight circle of women who lift me up at every turn, who check me when I need to be checked, but support me full heartedly at every turn. And so I owe so much of my peace and my sanity to them, but also a big piece of my success as well.
Hmm. That is, when you have your tribe and the women that are going to hold you to account and keep calling you up. That is powerful because you know that even in moments where you need a little more, you have some women that you can pull on and that will gird you up, and it's reciprocal. So, that's wonderful that you have that in your process of your journey. But I want to thank you so much, MJ, for taking your seat at the table today and staying a while with me. And it has been a great conversation, and I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Tommy. I appreciate this platform and always love talking to you. These are always like soul food conversations, right?